All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to April's Entrepreneur Ecosystem Coffee Break on April 21st, 2022. For those that may not know me and we haven't connected in a while, my name is Carol Spicer, and I'm the owner of Spicer Facilitation and Learning. I'm very pleased to welcome you to our monthly coffee break on behalf of Navigate Small Business. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that I am joining you from Pasadena in the unceded territory of the ancient Beothuk, and I acknowledge with respect the diversity and the culture and the traditions of all Indigenous people in our province, including the Beothuk, the Mi'kmaq, the Inuit, the Innu, and the Southern Labrador Inuit. And I ask you to take a moment to reflect on that. I am going to ask you in a few moments where you're joining us from today. But I do want to start off by acknowledging where I am today. So I will say hello, Gwe, bonjour à tous. Welcome to everyone. Very happy to have you here today. So I'm going to get right into our little survey. So we're going to get you working here first thing. So you should see on your slide, on your screen, that I'm going to ask you to go to Slido. So on your computers, now Carm, you're driving, you may not be able to do this, but on your computer, open up a browser window and go to slido.com. And when you get there, you're going to see right in the middle that you can log in and all those things, but you don't need to do that. It's going to ask you for a code. And the code is 955967. So 955967. And I got one question for you. What community are you joining us from today? And you should be able to just type into that and submit. And if you come back to the presentation, you're going to start to see some names pop up. Good morning, Richard. We're just doing a little poll on where folks are joining us from today. So if you go to slido.com, and when you're prompted, put in the code 955967. So those of you that have been around with me for a while know I get really excited about this kind of stuff. I'm really kind of nerdy when it comes to these things. I get excited to see how far we reach. So I think it's pretty cool. We're definitely up in Labrador this time. We're out we're out into St. John's, into our capital. We're in Corner Brook. We're at Pinchgut Lake. Somebody else must be on vacation joining us today. We're working from home. And we're way up in Nunatsiavut, up in Postville as well. So that's pretty cool. So this is the benefit that we have had with doing a virtual coffee break. So while we're just waiting for a few more votes to come in, for those that are brand new with us, I just want to give you a little background on where this sort of evolved from. Back in the time when we could all gather, we used to do coffee breaks in Corner Brook, and Brent and Allison and a few others that are here. Carla would join us at coffee shops, and we would connect. And we decided that to complement those in person, that we would try to offer some virtual connections for folks that maybe couldn't drive into Corner Brook. You can see, coming up from Lark Harbor or even from Deer Lake might have been a bit of a challenge for some folks. So we started a pilot in January 2020 to offer a virtual coffee break. Not to take away the in-person at that time, it was more to provide another opportunity. And we ran the pilot for 3 months. So that was January, February, March of 2020. Well, we all know what happened in March 16th, 2020. And so we have continued. We are now in our third year of our virtual coffee breaks. And this community, it's your community. You folks have certainly given us enough feedback to know that you welcome it. As I say, I have people that are traveling and driving and are still joining us here today. So we appreciate that. We do record the sessions and they are posted on social media with both myself at Spicer Facilitation and with Allison at Navigate Small Business. And we have had a number of people reach out to us to say that they appreciate the recordings as well. So this community is thriving. We've got, we're getting close to one of our highest attended sessions here so far. So we're really, really pleased on that. I would say, Allison can probably confirm with me, but I think the first couple sessions we had anywhere from 3 to 8 people. Currently, we have 30 here with us this morning. So, it certainly has grown in the last number of years. So thank you for that. Thank you for giving us that vote of confidence. And thank you to those that are joining us for the first time today. And we hope to continue to see you as we continue on. So we've got, if you're back on the screen, if you've left your browser window and you've come back onto the presentation or into your go-to, you can see we have people from all across this great province. I see Mireille is there. Mireille actually joined us from the UK, one of her first sessions. She was in the process of coming back home. And we've had a few folks, expats, join us from Alberta over the years too. So we've reached beyond we've reached beyond the Corner Brook place, that's for sure. So thank you. So Allison, who is actually on vacation and joining in by phone, is still there. Yes, she is. Allison, your slides of what is Navigate are up now. So Allison's going to do a little brief review of what Navigate is all about and why we've asked you to join us. Maybe I've lost Allison. Allison, you there?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I was here speaking and didn't realize. Okay.
No problem.
No, I was just saying my apologies for not being on screen today. I'm having internet connection issues. I'm actually out in the woods at the moment. Normally there's fairly decent Wi-Fi, but it's not working today for some reason. So my apologies again for joining this way. For those of you who have not joined us before, who are unfamiliar with Navigate, I'll just give you a little overview of the services we offer. So Navigate is a partnership between Grenfell Campus and CNA Corner Brook Campus. And we offer startup support to aspiring entrepreneurs, students, and the general public, mainly in Western Newfoundland, but sometimes beyond. And we do that through 3 different service pillars. So we have 2 entrepreneurship centers for early stage entrepreneurs. So that's, you have an idea or you want to learn about entrepreneurship or you're thinking about starting a business and you need help with a business plan, then you would come to one of our entrepreneurship centers, either at Grenfell Campus or CNA Campus. And then we also have a business incubator. So once you've launched your business, you've reached commercialization and you want to grow or pivot your business, then our incubator services can help. And we also have a makerspace for anyone wishing to do any design work, developing prototypes or even just to learn about some of the tools and technology that you might need to help grow your business. And just sort of a bit of an announcement for anyone joining us again for the first time or who hasn't been in contact with us recently. The business incubator and the makerspace, which were originally located on CNA and Grenfell Campus, are now moving to the new Center for Research and Innovation, which is for anyone who's in the Corner Brook area and you've seen the big old, it used to be the HR building of the mill, right across from the mill, that white building. It's been recently renovated and renovations are just about complete. And we're going to be getting everything set up and equipment moved in the coming weeks. So we're anticipating hopefully a launch by the end of May or beginning of June sometime, depending on, with COVID, it's hard to say when all the equipment will arrive, but we are hopeful that we should have it by then. And so we'll be sending out information and updates to everyone about when the grand opening is going to happen, and we welcome everyone to come and join us. There will be, the makerspace is expanding, so there will be what we're calling sort of a dirty makerspace with, that would be equipment such as welding, carpentry, etc. And also a clean makerspace for the tech side of things. And the business incubator and co-working space will be available to any entrepreneurs or people interested in entrepreneurship and innovation who want to come by and work from the space. And there's also a training center, an industrial training center, which is a partnership between the Corner Brook Pulp and Paper Limited and CNA, which will be located in the building. So it's going to be a great space, an exciting space, and we're hoping to get a lot of different people out and really have those those connections and collisions happening across sectors and really get those ideas flowing. So we invite you all to join us for that. So stay tuned for more information.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. I'm looking forward to that. I know I'm like everyone else that is aware of what's happening. Every time I drive by, it's like, oh, what's happening now? So it's kind of nice to see activity actually happening there, that you can see that there's work being done. So that's cool.
Absolutely. And it's beautiful. The building is absolutely beautiful inside. It's going to be a great space to work from.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to having a little spot to perch if I'm in Corner Brook for a bit and, connect with some people. So that'd be great. As Allison talked about, the connections are what this is all about, and the opportunity to provide this networking chance for people to come together. We've seen sales happen online in front of us. We've seen the synergies happen in chat. Myself, and the last time we had a call, Stanley was on, and we were just chit-chatting before, and I ended up doing some work with his group last week. So, the benefit of bringing folks together is really important. So on that note, one of the things that I do want to mention is over in chat. So you should see the little thought bubble up at the top, or your little box there with chat. Please put in, if you're comfortable, please put in your contact information. As we do send out a follow-up into Navigate's newsletter, and we're more than happy to share. So if you have social media that you want to promote, or your website, or an email address, or whatever it may be, please feel free to do so. Allison Robbins asked a question in chat about, is it solely for students in the area? And I don't believe it's just for students, your center, is it?
No, it's for the general public as well. Navigate's focus is mainly Western Newfoundland, but really it's for anyone in the area or coming to the area who wants to connect with other entrepreneurs and innovators and makers, and also for support organizations. Anyone who's on the call who is from another support org, we invite you to come and avail of the space as well. If you want to come every Wednesday and be there to meet with people, and then just let me know and we'll work that out. We really want it to be a hub for all things entrepreneurship and innovation related.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know myself, when I started my business, I heard from Brent and Scott Andrews about this ecosystem, and I'm like, what the heck is an entrepreneur ecosystem? And I've learned over the past 4 years the value of being part of this ecosystem. So we encourage you to stay connected with people that you see here. If there's someone on the line that says something that you're interested in, reach out to them through the chat. You can private message or just jot down their contact info, and we encourage you to do that. That's what it's about. We're just so pleased to be able to bring you folks together and provide you this platform to do so. And thank you to Navigate and all of their sponsors for bringing us together each month. All right, so today is about Indigenous entrepreneurship. Marae, you're in twice.
That's me.
That's okay. There you go. You're good. So we do have a few folks that have agreed to be our speakers on today, and I've also got a few other folks that I might be calling on you because I know you're somewhat connected into this space. And really what we wanted to do today is to hear from some Indigenous entrepreneurs, which we do have on the line, to hear from some organizations that support Indigenous entrepreneurs, And then we also want to have a bit of a discussion around working with Indigenous organizations. And I've been absolutely blessed, and I see several of my clients here online that I've done work with in the Indigenous community, and it's been such a eye-opening experience for me as a non-Indigenous person. They have been completely welcoming, but I think there's some lessons that we can all learn. And so I'm hoping today that we can have a little bit of a conversation about how we can incorporate cultural sensitivity for those of us that are non-Indigenous, and how you would like to see us work with you, um, and those types of conversations. I think they're really, really important. Those of you that have been around with us for a long, long time, I think it was a year ago, we had a big diversity session. We talked about Indigenous, we talked about people of color, we talked about gender diversity, and so on. So we're really happy to continue this conversation. And I think it's an important topic. So I'm wondering if I can call on Miss Arlene to kick us off. Arlene's with the support organization. So if you want to introduce yourself, Arlene, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the resources that you offer Indigenous entrepreneurs.
Hi, thanks, Carol. So my name is Arlene White, and I'm the Business Development Officer with Ulnooweg Development Group. We're a financial institution, and we deal with Indigenous entrepreneurs throughout Atlantic Canada. So we basically offer $250,000 loans to Indigenous businesses. You have to be 51% Indigenous ownership. And you need your business plan and all the good stuff that you need for a business. But we also offer, it's called an Aboriginal Business Financing Program, which is there to pretty much help Indigenous entrepreneurs start and grow their business. It's based on need. It's not a grant. It's a non-repayable contribution, and it's based on the financial need of the business or the person. So not everyone will qualify, but we do help the Indigenous entrepreneurs that normally can't obtain financing through mainstream lending. So we do have a variety of tools available for entrepreneurs. We have some self-assessment tools. We have a fillable business business plan kit. We have a toolkit, which Carol, you have seen in the past, which is quite detailed to help Indigenous entrepreneurs get started and move forward. We have a couple of workshops that we've developed in the past and delivered. We have financial capacity and Indigenous entrepreneurship. And we just this week hired a business support person, and Nicole Travers is that business support person, and she's online here today. So that's an additional service we will be offering for Indigenous entrepreneurs who need that extra help or hand-holding to get started. So that's Ulnooweg in our lending department in a very quick snapshot.
That's excellent. And yes, I met you, Arlene, in early days. I don't know if I'd actually even started or if I was in that pre-exploratory. We were at an event that at Enlow offered. Carla was there, and I think Brent was there as well. And I remember you mentioning that toolkit. And that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about today, because one of the things that struck me when I looked at that toolkit, and it's very indicative of Enlow's templates and CBDC's templates and so on. However, there's one entire section on culture and creating your name and how you connect to culture. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think that really opened up my eyes to think about when you're branding yourself and whatnot. Like it seems to be quite different, or there seems to be some guidance in that area. Could you expand maybe a little bit on that? Because I thought that was really interesting. I'm putting you on the spot here, I know.
You really are, because I don't look at the toolkit very much, but I think I can speak to the vision of that from our COO, Chris Gugu, who's very much a visionary and believes in supporting the Indigenous community and really making them think about what they're doing and connecting it back to their community, their family. What does it mean to be Indigenous? What does it mean to bring that Indigenous lifestyle way of knowing into your business? And how does that reflect today and to the next 7 generations? So the vision is all about that full circle. How do you connect? How do you represent if it's Mi'kmaq, how do you represent that Mi'kmaq nation? How do you represent the Innu family that you're representing? Is all about join in
Hmm.
and representing the whole aspect of life in that circle
Hmm.
format.
Yeah, and I found that really interesting because at the time I was going through what am I going to call my business? What are my colors going to be? And, mine was sort of, I didn't think of culture, and it really sort of opened my eyes. So I wonder, based on that, if I could jump over and put Ivan on the spot for a moment. Ivan is an Indigenous entrepreneur, and I'm wondering, Ivan, if you can maybe share a little bit of what it means to you to be an Indigenous entrepreneur.
Sure. I was actually going to play a joke and pretend that I was muted and then go and then wait for everyone to tell me you're muted because someone has to do that on this meeting. It's like a thing that we have to do now.
Oh yeah, I read
So
somewhere it's like we're in a modern day seance. I can see you, but I can't hear you, or I can hear you, but I can't see you.
exactly.
I thought that was a cool way of looking at it.
So I own and operate a business called Abadagwit, which is we spell it phonetically Abadak, which means the water is returning to where it came from. Um, we think it's related to the name for Badek, which you'll see if you go to Badek, it's the water is returning where it came from. And we at Abadek create platforms and tell stories of Mi'kmaq people, their heritage and history on the island of Newfoundland. That is our brand, that is our tagline, that is our slogan. And the basic premise of where we create and where we come from when we try and reach that goal and that slogan and be that brand is that our views are a participation with nature's relationships, not just about deciphering how they work and then to try and control them. Nogama means that we all exist and are related to everything that exists with us. So that's where we come from as a business. Now, before we were guiding and bringing people out into the forest, and dad began to feel like that was more extractive than anything else, because if we had to fight to up the amount of licenses to stay open, why did we have to fight when the inverse of that was that the province or whoever was issuing the license would be all about getting my father on a screen and sending him somewhere to say, look, we have a Mi'kmaq guide. So
Hmm.
it became like this relationship that dad couldn't find tenability. And so we sold all the bear, caribou, and moose license and moved back into community. And from there, um, dad wants to retire. So it was my turn to take the reins and try and be one quarter. I think if I could be one quarter of what dad is, I think we could be super successful. One quarter of what that man currently does and what he knows. Now I'm not a person who goes out into the woods, and I sort of have to be pushed to accept that as my thing. So I've looked at different platforms and different ways of telling the story. So I've talked to people and collected histories, and I want to be able to platform other people more to myself. So I told someone yesterday that in high school I was in a band called Red Truck, and our last show was just before we graduated in June 2001. I did not play on a stage in front of people until last year in Cowhead. From that time, from 2001 until 2021, for 20 years, I just created things for other people to be able to do that. And I think that's a cool direction, and it's something that I can appreciate. And that's what I want to make my business about. It's a
Hmm.
platform for others to be able to tell their story and to appropriately highlight and exist as Mi'kmaq people on the island of Newfoundland, because we don't get to write our own story at all until very recently, right?
Okay, interesting. And that's interesting, Ivan, because you and I met actually through storytelling. Ivan interviewed my grandfather, who will be 98 in June, and interviewed him because he grew up in Buren, in a little place called Stepaside, and there was the anniversary of the tsunami, the Great Tsunami, and Ivan came out and interviewed my grandfather up at the home in Deer Lake. And so storytelling is an interesting piece. So I'm going to open this up. And I'm not going to put anybody particularly on the spot, but I do know there's a few folks here that are working with storytelling type things. But does anyone want to kind of jump in about storytelling and build on what Ivan just said? Because I do think that's a big part of Indigenous culture that I've seen anyway. And I'm a storyteller because I love telling and talking. I get paid to talk for a living, which is really cool for me. But anyone else want to jump in on that about storytelling? Is that something that kind of resonates?
Hi, so this is Trina Reed.
Hi, Trina.
I just wanted to kind of chat a little bit about our business. We do a lot of storytelling actually within our business. It's called Under the Stump. And again, one of these things that we tried to figure out what could we call it to resonate with our heritage, our culture. I mean, we are Indigenous, but we're also Newfoundlanders. And as being a Newfoundlander, we're great storytellers. So what we started doing was just taking people into backcountry and just talking about our heritage and culture as a whole, not one in particular. Since we started it, this is our 5th summer coming up, I believe it is now. We've kind of incorporated more of our Indigenous culture. So we're telling the stories of what our ancestors did, getting back to Mother Nature, and we're actually showing people how to incorporate things like your teas and how to make it flavorful. And we take them out and let them experience berry picking, because where we actually go, we pass by raspberries and sometimes blueberries at the same time. So we incorporate that in a little bit of taste testing, and we tell a bit the hardships of our ancestors, right up to what we deal with today. And we try to show them that not only what we did years ago before my time, we also do that today. So we still
Mhm.
gather the same way. We still moose hunt. We don't moose hunt, but we tell them we're going moose hunting to try to find the moose. But people really appreciate the fact that they're getting to experience what our ancestors and we do. Like they come to
Mhm.
this island and they want to see what we do. They want to touch, feel, smell, be a part of it. And it seems like it really gives them a true appreciation of our culture once they get to do that. So I
Mhm.
think storytelling, even though if you're not a great storyteller, it doesn't have to be a scripted one. When we go,
Mhm.
we have our certain things we say, but generally every tour we do is different depending on the group that we're with. And
Okay.
we try to customize, keeping the same story information there, but we want to make sure that when people leave, it's an authentic experience, that they understand what the wholesome part of what we're trying to give, whether it's just a story at a time or whether they're getting, taste testing throughout it, or we're doing music. Like we try to incorporate a lot of different things. And I think if we don't put the stories into it and tell them authentically, then people just don't get it.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where we're at.
And where are you, Trina? Where's your business located?
We're in Rocky Harbor.
Okay.
Mm.
So if I could like throw a caution to Trina about wording, you might want to be more specific, because there's no such thing as Indigenous culture except what Canada considers Indigenous culture. So if you're more specific with who you are and where you're from and your ancestors, I think you'll do even better, and you will sort of create a much better representation of who you are, better than saying Indigenous culture. So if you're specific, then you're representing your ancestors better. You're honoring the people that you were saying that you honor better.
So how do you mean? Do you mean saying
If
that
you're
I'm
if you're
Mi'kmaq
Mi'kmaq,
First
you don't
Nation?
say Indigenous culture. You need to say you're Mi'kmaq. Yeah. So if you're
Okay,
Innu or
and
Inuit,
well, I'm glad you brought that point up, because initially that's how we identified
mhm.
as Mi'kmaq. Everything we had, everything that we put out on social media, that's how it was all identified, that we were Mi'kmaq, that, we wanted to share our traditions and get back to Mother Nature and all those kind of Mother Earth. And then we were suggested to change everything to Indigenous. It would look more favorably to be identifying as Indigenous as opposed to our Mi'kmaq. So
There are thousands and thousands of people who identify as an indigenous people now in Canada who aren't indigenous at all. So that's not actually a better path
okay,
forward in my mind.
no, okay, well, it's great discussion on that, because like I said, initially that's how we were identifying, and we were brought back to saying Indigenous as a whole.
I think that's an interesting viewpoint too, Ivan. I know as a non-Indigenous person, until I was exposed to as many people as I have, and Jillian's been holding her hand up patiently, and she's another Indigenous organization. Um, I wouldn't have known the differences. And so I kind of see both sides of this, because I think if I'm non-Indigenous, to say Indigenous is going to pique my interest,
Mhm.
but then to honor your ancestors, I get that now because I've done a lot of work with Qalipu, and the most overwhelming experience I just had, Yvonne was there. We were at a circle, and I was allowed to be part of several ceremonies over a couple days. But one of her colleagues handed me a drum in the middle of a song, and I actually got to drum, and I mean it was just an absolutely incredible experience. Now, would I do that with? I asked Ruth about it, who's a different. She's up in Nunatsiavut, but she said no, we don't kind of do those types of ceremonies. So like that was an opening to me. So I kind of see both sides of it. To hook me in as a non-Indigenous, maybe say Indigenous to get me there, but I do agree that to identify the different cultures is really important, because I think that does honor your own ancestors in your own ways. Very interesting. Jillian, you want to jump in? You're with a different Indigenous community up in Nunatsiavut.
Yeah, so I work with the Nunatsiavut government along the north coast, and a couple of projects that we've been working on is guidebooks for our communities, because when we did our tourism strategy, what we heard from our community members were that a lot of the younger people, they're interested and they want to be guides, but they aren't comfortable with sharing some of the stories just because they feel like their elders know more stories than them, and the elders wanted to make sure that the stories that they were sharing, was also that the youth felt comfortable with sharing them. So we're working on a project now where we're collecting stories from community members to develop into a guidebook. So the information is not going to be shared out to visitors, it's going to be shared with the community so that they're comfortable and know and understand the stories, so that when they go to share them, they've got more confidence. And we're also working on another guidebook project for Hebron. So Hebron was a community along the north coast of Labrador that Inuit were forced to relocate from in 1959. And they were told by the provincial government that they were going to get, jobs, and that there would be houses waiting for them in other communities, but there wasn't. And it caused a lot of trauma for the people from Hebron who were forced to relocate. So now the Nunatsiavut government, we own the church building that's there, as well as two cabins, and we operate a ambassador and restoration program. So we're working now to collect stories from relocatees and their families to develop a guidebook for staff, because it's really important that the people who were forced to relocate, and their ancestor, or their people families are providing us guidance in the stories that we tell. Right now, we're fortunate that we have relocatees who are our employees that go back up in the summer times, but they're getting up in age now, and we want to make sure moving forward that we're telling the right stories.
Hmm. So I'm wondering too, Jillian, around this conversation of how to, um, you know, I guess market or identify who you are. You're with the NLEDA, which is the Newfoundland Labrador Indigenous Tourism Association, which is where I met Richard as well. And Richard, if your audio is working, I'm going to put you on the spot in just a moment too. But Jillian, do you want to speak to how the Indigenous communities in our province are coming together? Because I was absolutely impressed, I have to say, that 5 Indigenous community groups were coming together for the greater good. So I just wonder if you want to speak to that a little bit. That's to you, Jill.
Yeah, so the um, Newfoundland and Labrador Indigenous Tourism Association, which we call INLITA, was formed from a working group of that consisted of Indigenous people from all across the province to help grow Indigenous tourism. So from the working group, we created a strategy. This was a couple, I can't remember what year it was now. It was a couple of years ago. So we created this 5-year strategy where there were, we hired a consultant and they did interviews and questionnaires and stuff. And we reach out to people from all across the province to get this developed. And from there we created from the working group a board of directors. So one of the things that we found during the strategy was we heard from a lot of people about like grassroots and working with communities, because I think that's a big piece of developing Indigenous tourism. And so we've made a lot of great strides in the last year or so. We have Caroline Swan here as well, and she's our first employee, our executive director. We were also doing some work with Richard Lewis with Indigo. I don't know if that's what you were looking for, Carol, or
That's exactly what I'm looking for. And I think the intention was, so it's a bit to what Ivan and Trina's conversation was about, to attract tourists who are non-Indigenous, um, may not know, to Ivan, to your point, there's thousands of people across the country in all different bands and different backgrounds and so on. But within our own province, there were 5 different groups that realized there may be some power in marketing Indigenous grassroots experiences. But then when you get down into it, in this part of the province, you're going to have a Mi'kmaq experience. In this part of the province, you're going to have an Innu experience, and so on. So it was interesting because that group, I did work with them doing some strategic planning, action planning beyond that, and it was sort of raised of how each group is so unique and so different and works so differently, and yet they're putting their differences aside to work for the greater good. So I'm really pleased to hear about Carolyn being on. I wasn't sure what organization you were with, Carolyn, so that's cool to know that you're on board to help bring that forward. Stanley, you've got your hand raised up, and then Richard, I got a question for you after this one. So Stanley, go ahead.
Thank you. Ulakut, good morning, Inuktitut. Piahanga, Langanga means talk. Kiwagik means I will tell you something. So, as from my perspective, storytelling, we don't have a specific word in Inuktitut for storytelling. We say Piahanga, which means talk. Stories are passed down from generation to generation, as most on the call know. It stains who we are as people in our communities. It, formally validates experience, nurtures our relationships, and, really serves to sustain our cultural identity for a long time. And even when it comes to in this context of this webinar today, the business sense, my grandfather trapped. They trapped not always because they loved to go trap and be away from their family for 4 and 5 months because it was hard work. They went because they had to make a living. So it was economic development in the simplest terms. And they had to come back and negotiate the price with the Hudson Bay Company. So it was business at its simplest terms. But to your point, Carol, we don't have a specific word for storytelling. We say talk. And in Mi'kmaq, they say, I will tell you something.
Yes, and I've also learned in Mi'kmaq, we don't say, there's no goodbye. It's see you later, Namostus. So I'm learning that one too.
in Inuktitut, we say Hakshanai, and it's when two travelers traveled in the north and come across each other. And it means several things, but basically it means be safe, be strong. See you next time. Hakshanai.
Okay.
In Inuktitut, there's over probably 50 words for ice and snow.
Yeah, one of my first experiences with Inuktitut, it was actually my first Indigenous experience. I was facilitating a meeting between communities in Nunavut, Nunavik, and Cree Nation. So three different communities coming together with the federal government on climate change to discuss polar bears. And so this was in Montreal, neutral territory, and I was flown in, and the first thing that happened was, Carol, you are speaking far too fast for our translators to translate you into Inuktitut. And I'm like, okay, slow down. Typical Newfoundlander, getting excited and going on and on. But for me, and this is where I want to go to you, Richard, I want to ask a little bit about working with Indigenous organizations, because I know that's what you do. I went into this, so I just want to share my experience if I can. I went into this event. I was hired by the government of Canada to work with Indigenous communities and scientists. So right off the bat, we've got headbutting because we have Indigenous knowledge versus scientists. So already there's a disconnect. So me being me, I want to have a facilitation plan. And they said, no, you can't have a facilitation plan. The Indigenous leaders are leading the meeting. I said, well, what do you have me for then? Well, because we need you to get some information. I said, well, I need to have a facilitation plan. Nope, you're just going to have to go into the meeting. I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay, so fly to Montreal. There's a table of 30 people at the table. It's in a horseshoe, and I'm at the front. And there's another 35 or 40 people on the outside, which were all the government people. At the table were the Indigenous communities. Out of the 30 people, I quickly realized there were only about 5 speakers. And it was the elders of the communities that were speaking. Not everyone at the table was able to speak. And then the two chairs, the two co-chairs, which were from 2 different communities. One was from Nunavik and one was from Nunavut. And totally blind for me. But I quickly learned that. And I think because I was able to work with that, I earned their respect. They earned my respect. It was actually the most well-run meeting I've ever attended. I will say it was the most respectful meeting, even though there were differences. So I had been warned that at some point, the Indigenous peoples in the room will kick all government people out. And we need you to understand what we need to get some information from them. And that's what we want you to do. I said, okay. Oh, and by the way, the last time we did this, they kicked the facilitator out as well. And he was Indigenous. They didn't like him. I'm like, okay. So sure enough, partway through, all government people have to leave. 40 people get up and leave the room. And so I approached the 2 chairs and I said, may I stay? And they said, yes, you may. You're the facilitator. I'm like, okay, great. They then broke into their caucuses and all started speaking their own language. So I'm standing with them for about 40 minutes, not understanding one word because there's not one word of English. I'm like, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing here. But then they came back and I was able to facilitate a conversation and we had it translated and so on. So, and then we brought all the government people back in. So that was my first real experience. So that long story, I told you I like to tell stories, is leading to Richard, who works with Indigenous folks. And one of the things that I'm hoping to gain from some people here today, what are some things we should be thinking about when we work with Indigenous organizations? And I'm speaking now as a non-Indigenous person looking to do work, and there's other entrepreneurs here on the line that are non-Indigenous that may be wanting to work with Indigenous. So I'm hoping, Richard, you might have your audio because I know you're up in Goose Bay working with Indigenous communities. Is there anything you can share? And if you can't, that's fine. I'll throw it out to anyone else that might have some insight. And here you go, Ivan. He's on mute.
He actually told me that he was using his phone's audio, but apparently that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Nope.
No. Okay. Well, if there's anything you have, Richard, if you can hear us, you might be able to pop into chat. Is there anyone else on the line then that on the call that might have some suggestions of how to work with Indigenous communities or Indigenous leaders?
Or somebody new, right?
Well, you can jump in too, Ivan.
He said I can hear you and I'm on the phone, but audio's not working yet. I figured that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I'll probably inspire somebody to talk next by talking a little bit. when I went to college for business administration marketing, I read a lot of stuff on my own that wasn't given to me by the teachers or the programs that they were teaching. And I came across this man named Peter Drucker, who spent time in Japan and learned about ways that they set up businesses. And he came back with a nugget of wisdom that I already had stated in my plans in the entrepreneur class. The entrepreneur class was where we learned to be running our own businesses. And I already stated that I did not feel that the function of a business that I wanted to create would be to make more money. Making more money and getting rich is not the function of a business or being an entrepreneur for me. It never has
Okay.
been, and I don't think it'll ever will be. And they didn't reject that because I was able to find this almost lost nugget from a man named Peter Drucker, who helped write most of the books that I had in my marketing class. It was like Ogilvy, Drucker, and Porter. Their names were in all the books, so they couldn't deny me my feelings and my learned knowledge from home, from my community and my family. And it's this: because the purpose of a business is to create a customer or to fill a need, a business enterprise has two and only two basic functions: marketing and innovation. Marketing and innovation produce results. All the rest is a cost. Marketing is the distinguishing and unique function of a business, and innovation is the creation of a better solution to a problem. Because we always say that the function of a business is to fill a need and fill a want for someone.
Mm-hmm.
In nowhere in that sentence does it say the function of a business is to make someone a billionaire so they can shoot rockets into space.
And buy
Or to
Twitter,
make,
apparently.
yeah, he owns a portion of it, I think now 13% or some weird
Yeah,
number. But
I just saw a breaking headline. He's got more money somehow, or he's got just done something to get it. So who knows?
so that's where I come from. And if you want to um, work with community, you have to realize that if you're not um, being inclusive, collaborative, and sharing with community from that direction, you're probably not going to be successful or even wanted in the community. Like you said, the facilitator was someone who was Indigenous, and they tossed him from the room anyway because they didn't like him. And it was probably
Mm-hmm.
because he didn't fulfill their want and need in a facilitator, which was to see someone who understood them and was on their side.
Mm-hmm.
So when you toss
Yeah,
40 people out of a room and you have 30 left, you don't want to make it 29. But if you feel it needs to be 29, you're going to throw that guy out every time because
yeah,
you felt that he should have went with the 40 because he thought the same way as them.
yeah. And I really think part of it was just respecting the protocol and understanding the elder, which I had never experienced. I'd been in a room with the loud mouths and the shy and the demanding and the whatever, in different organizations. But it took me a little while, but not, I think that is one of the good things I can do is read a room. I really quickly realized, okay, these are the four people I need to make eye contact with. These are the four people that I need to respect as elders. And there was even a younger person, considerably younger, who in my mind I thought, this gentleman has done something in his community to earn respect because he's allowed to speak next to his elder. And that was something that was really eye-opening for me. When I've, been in meetings where just everybody pops in and just they don't necessarily care about hierarchy. Maybe that's a wrong way to say it, but but there's a definite hierarchy in the room that I was able to do. And you had your hand up, and I know you put it down so long, and then I'm going to go to Arlene. But Ange, did you want to jump in on that one? Maybe
Yeah,
let folks
sure.
know who
Yeah,
you are and where you are, and then jump in, please.
absolutely. Thanks. My name is Ange Brockway, and I'm the manager of tourism and community development with Qalipu First Nation. So I'm based out of Corner Brook. I'm joining you from Corner Brook here this morning. And I just wanted to mention because anytime I'm in a room and this question comes up, I think it's really important to make note that everybody is at a different stage of learning or understanding about their own culture. Some people have grown up with it, some people have not. So when you are a non-Indigenous person approaching an Indigenous business, don't always expect that that person is going to have all the answers for you when it comes to things like protocol or cultural sensitivity, go in there with the knowledge that sometimes the person that you're going to be dealing with is not necessarily as well versed in their culture as what you would expect them to be, and understand that that's normal. Everybody's at a different stage of learning, and we see that here even just on this call where we're kind of, I don't want to say correcting each other, but we're informing each other. This is also another way to do this. So we're all learning. And I think that's just an important piece to remember.
That's excellent. Thank you, Ange. The event that I was at with Yvonne and her team, we were fortunate to have Elder Odell out leading a few ceremonies. And I was really impressed with how open she made it, that we could ask questions and realizing it wasn't just me as the only person who didn't know. So to your point, there were several of Yvonne's colleagues that maybe were a bit younger, hadn't had those experiences, and so they were asking just as many questions as I was about that. So that's a good point to bring up. Thank you. Arlene.
So thanks. Just to add to some points, when you're dealing with Indigenous businesses, Indigenous people, it's also important to know what group you're dealing with, because some different Indigenous groups, like some Mi'kmaq, some Innu, we all have different cultures and protocols. And sometimes as Indigenous people, like Mi'kmaq people, Innu people, they won't look you in the eye. And that doesn't mean that we're shy or that we don't want look at you. Sometimes it just is a sign of respect. So you have to really know what audience you're in to the different groups, and that's why it's so important to know what group, what nation you're dealing with. When you're dealing with Indigenous businesses and Indigenous people, we're not iPads. We don't respond automatically. And lately, every time there's an event and at the very last minute, they need someone to drum or sing or have an opening prayer, where it's like, we're not an afterthought. If you want us involved, we should be consulted and in the planning stages, not an afterthought after you've had it all planned out and now, we need to include the Indigenous voice here. So include us at the beginning, and I'll go with the saying, nothing about us without us. So I think that's the most important takeaway for most of us as Indigenous people. Thanks.
That's really important. And I thank you, Arlene, for bringing that up, because that brings two questions to mind. When I worked with Richard and Jillian and Ruth, and prior to Carolyn being on board with Enlita, there was a lady from Southern Labrador, Roxanne, and she made the comment, and she's speaking for her people, so I won't say that it's all Indigenous groups, but she said, we are very slow at making decisions. We're very deliberate at making decisions. And we may need to go back into our communities to make decisions, and we need to seek elders to make decisions. Now, I came from provincial government working with Brent, so I'm used to slow decision making. But now as a consultant, you're kind of looking for that. You're looking for those quick answers because you're trying to manage schedules and different clients and so on. So that's something I've learned, that I don't take offense if I send something to Yvonne and she doesn't answer for a little while, because I understand that there's different decision makings or different things that are happening. So thank you, Arlene, for bringing that up. The second piece, however, and I'm bringing this up on behalf of one of our entrepreneurs here who is in the wellness industry, and she is planning a retreat in June, along with Carmelita, who's driving. So I'm not going to put Carmelita on the spot here, but certainly she's here as well. And they want to incorporate, some piece of wellness from the Indigenous community. And I've tried to connect her with people at Qalipu. She's tried to reach out. So how do we do this? How, if we don't want you to be the last minute thought, how do we do this? How do we bring you in to
it's not
the
just
work that we're doing?
It's not just that. It's also, if you're not getting a response, it's a no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that's good to know.
Yeah.
Because I think we would just keep going and going and going until we finally actually get the no. So maybe, okay, interesting.
Carol, I don't know if you can hear me. This is
I can.
Allison.
Yep. Yep.
Actually, it's so interesting to me listening to a lot of the points. And sorry, folks, I haven't been wanting to jump in simply because I'm taking notes and listening carefully. So many things about everyone's experiences remind me of experiences that I had living and working abroad, and in particular in Japan. And like Ivan, to your point, in Japanese culture, confrontation is sort of frowned upon, or anything sort of a negative response is somewhat frowned upon. So there are roundabout ways of saying no. So if you would ask, I don't know, if I asked my boss, for example, if I could take a vacation, if my boss made a sound of sort of sucking air and then saying maybe, that was a definite no. But they didn't want to offend and didn't want anyone to lose faith. And it's interesting how the silence can mean no as well. And in many cultures, like if you take just Japan as an example, context is so important, because we have high context cultures where everything is spoken, and you know, or we have cultures where people are speaking to tell you what you know, what you should understand, and then there are cultures where it's more about body language and what's unsaid. I'm just curious, would you consider that would be sort of something that would be true of some of the local Indigenous cultures as well, that sort of context piece? And also another thing that comes to mind is certain cultures are very much about the individual, while other cultures are very much about the collective. And that sort of going back and having to have consensus before coming forward with an answer, or you know, a sort of a response. It again, it reminds me very much of Japan, in that it was all about the collective, and you would defer to your elders and you would defer to the collective versus voicing an individual opinion. Would you say there are similarities in those things?
And I actually forgot that you can't see the chat. So when Carol mentioned deliberate, I actually went and looked and found a piece that I was working on for my job, that dictionary defines what we do in community as deliberate democracy, or deliberative democracy. And you talk until you're exhausted about talking about something. If it takes days, it takes days. We create a game that you can play while that democracy is happening. And you always push for consensus, but you can accept a majority if everyone agrees that a majority is acceptable in a consensus. So there's always these, for lack of a better term, checks and balances that exist. But deliberative democracy is like the core of how it works. And if you don't get an answer, it usually means no, because Arlene mentioned nothing about us without us. That's a factor of that. So the way things work is we're constantly getting asked if we want to be included, without being asked if we have the time and capacity and ability to be included.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't always say yes, and sometimes we don't even have the ability to properly say no respectfully, so we leave it unanswered. We'll get back to it eventually, maybe, but if there's no answer, it usually means no.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, very, very, very similar to the way that things work in Japanese culture as well. Yeah, I find it really interesting. But yeah, it's the sort of thing coming in from the outside, particularly if you, and again, I'm just using that experience, but with you know, Canadian culture in this sort of, I'll say, broader sense, being a little more direct and loud and whatnot. Coming in for me, going into Japan, it took some stepping back and being quiet and listening and observing to understand that, because you know, everyone comes in with their own perspective and their own habits, and is not necessarily aware of, particularly in cultures that are very much about the context and about the unsaid. And it you know, I made a lot of missteps along the way. And it's really important, I think, for anyone approaching any culture to stop, listen, learn, observe first, and ask, like, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, rather than assume.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a really big piece. Ange, you wanted to jump in here?
Yeah, hi. Hi again. No, just something that strikes me sometimes is that, and I don't want to be rude or offend anybody, but I do find that sometimes people feel like just working at the band office, my experience has been that people feel that this is kind of like a one-stop shop for everything Indigenous. So if I'm looking for something Indigenous, I'm going to call up the band office. They're going to connect me to whoever. And that's not really the way it works. I mean, we're talking about community here. We're not talking about Walmart. And again, I don't mean that to offend anybody, but I think it's really important that you go back to the why. You know, why am I looking for somebody Indigenous? Why am I trying to incorporate something Indigenous in my practices or in my business? And, you know, if your why is a good why, you're going to take the time to absolutely connect with the band office if you want to. And, you know, we'll try where we can to help out. But you're going to take the time to explore not just the band offices, but the community itself and build some relationships there rather than picking up the phone and saying, I'm going to coordinate something with somebody Indigenous and that's going to check my Indigenous box. Because we see way, way, way too much of that. And I think that it's important to talk about that.
That's awesome, Ange. Thank you so much for sharing that. I get that. That makes sense to me now. And the reason I say that is I would email Brent or Scott to say, hey, give me a connection to so and so, and they would, you know, and for whatever reason, I need somebody who's familiar with aquaculture. I did that with somebody yesterday. They contacted me, contacted me about a biodigester for their farm, and they want fish waste. Okay, sure. So I email somebody I know at government who works in aquaculture, who then puts her on to somebody who works with fish waste. Makes sense, right? It works. But I can see the difference here. So thank you. I really appreciate that because that I don't know, that's been a light bulb for me. Richard, you've got your hand up. I'm wondering if you've got things worked out there.
Can you hear me? I just wanted to test the audio.
Yes, we got you.
Oh, okay, good. All right. So yeah, just wanted to provide a comment there. I did put a comment in the chat, but not sure if people saw it. In my experience, it's really varied by Indigenous group, and it's not even fair to say it varies by Indigenous group because it's almost like I've had different departments within Indigenous groups who treat projects very differently and treat meetings very differently. Some departments will want to, like if I'm facilitating a meeting, they'll want me to keep a very tight agenda. They'll want 10 or 15 minutes per agenda item and say, if we go beyond this, you need to cut it off. Whereas another department within the same Indigenous group, I'll just use a fisheries meeting that I facilitated recently, for example. Under no circumstances was I to kind of close off an agenda item because the entity in this case wanted to ensure that the harvesters had time to provide feedback, which was completely understandable. So you almost have to have that conversation with the organization ahead of time if you can. If not, Carol, back to your point, you almost need to become an expert in a hurry in terms of how to read the room. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's even fair to say it's by Indigenous group or Indigenous versus non-Indigenous. It really, the group varies, and it varies. Each group and each organization is unique.
Okay, and that's a valid
the other
point
I want to make, and this goes back to what Ange said around one-stop shop, and especially in the early going for Indigrow. We fielded so many calls from organizations who wanted to attach our name to their project to tick a box. Mm-hmm. And at first, I was really excited that all these organizations were reaching out. But then as I started to ask more questions, I realized that they weren't necessarily authentic in their intentions, and they didn't truly want to make a difference to the Indigenous community. They just wanted to tick a box to reach their own goal. And it got to a point where we just started, and we continue to turn down these projects because they're organizations who want to take advantage of what's out there now for Indigenous funding programs, just as an example, or, you know, to tap into a funding program but they're using it to meet their own agenda without mm-hmm. actually wanting to make a difference to the Indigenous community or to the Indigenous group. So that's something that it took me a little while to wrap my head around and to understand how we should respond. And how we respond now is I'm very blunt with the organizations who reach out, and I tell them to impress us before we'll attach our name to a project, because we won't do that, because that's not what we're here to do. So I just wanted to to just tell you, Ange, that I've gotten those same types of calls.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and I guess like I don't want this to be, there's a blanket statement. I think this conversation is fantastic because it's not an us versus them. It's not a this group versus that group. It's I've had this conversation with Carla and others even about female entrepreneurs. And why do we have to say female entrepreneurs? And why do we say male nurse? And why do we put these labels for different groups? And sometimes it's because of those boxes and things that people are looking. I have a friend of mine, and I'm not saying this to offend in any way, but his statement is, I'm male, stale, and pale. He says, I'm a white 57-year-old man. He said, I don't tick any box anywhere. And so but again, he wants to be hired on his merit, not because he ticks a box. But he says he's kind of gone the other way. So I kind of thought that was an interesting viewpoint. Arlene.
Yeah, just to follow up on Ange's comment about the why you want Indigenous businesses or representation or people involved. Sometimes it's that why is so important, because if you're just looking for knowledge, if you're just looking to, I hate this term, but check that box again, it's also, you have to be very conscious and aware. Are you actually appropriating our culture? If you're, we have our own ceremonies, our own cultures, and our own traditions. And if you're just trying to use them cultures and ceremonies and traditions to show that you're doing something with Indigenous people, then you're walking a line of appropriation, and you're gonna separate the Indigenous people from the non-Indigenous people, and it'll cause rifts. So there's that caution there as well.
That's huge. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good perspective. And it's interesting you say that because, like I say, I've been with Yvonne's group quite considerably now over the last couple of years, and they've been so welcoming to bring me in, but I've been concerned about being in their ceremonies or their different traditions or different things that are happening because of that. I don't want this to be, and the interesting thing for me, for instance, is we start all of our sessions with a prayer. And I'm okay with that, but that was different. I can guarantee Brent and I have never been in a government meeting that opened with a prayer. So we were at an event in Corner Brook, and one of Yvonne's colleagues opened with a prayer. But at the end, the director asked if we would say a closing prayer, and nobody's volunteered. So I volunteered. I said I will say a closing prayer, but I will be praying to my God. And they said, that's fine. Like that's what we want you to do. So similarly at the fire ceremony, when we said prayers in front of the fire, most everyone, of course, was praying to the Creator, and I prayed to my God, and that was okay. But I felt so accepted because of that, and it was, I think it would have been, to me, it would have been false for me to pray to the Creator. I don't know who the Creator is. That's not mine. Right? But I can believe in the traditions and my own values, and they align. That's the thing that always impressed me, is how much the learnings that I'm getting from the Mi'kmaq group, especially, is aligned with my own values. So that's been really, really valuable for me anyway. Looking at the time, I could go on this conversation forever. Allison, you want to jump in?
Just one comment, actually, because the comment of ticking a box has come up a few times, and just to kind of look at the other side of that coin for a moment. I worked in event organization management for a number of years, and so I would hear people talking about the events they were organizing, and I think there was an maybe a misconception among groups that there was that they might offend Indigenous groups if they weren't invited to a given event as well. So I think it's important to, like, the fact that we're talking about this, that groups don't want to be invited to tick a box. I think there can be a misunderstanding on the other side of that too, feeling that there might be some offense if Qalipu, for example, isn't invited. So I think it's great that we're having this conversation so that everyone can really ask those questions and ask, why am I doing this? I think that's really important.
I really love that. That's my huge takeaway today, Allison, for me is, if you're asking the question, why is it you're asking it? And to Arlene and Ange's point, are you authentic? Or is this real? Is there a real value behind that and why you're doing that? Before I lead on to the next piece, there's an important question in chat, and I'm going to direct some of the folks here who've been responding. Robin has posed a very personal question here. She's not aware of her heritage. Her great grandfather was taken, likely from Grenfell Mission, from Labrador and adopted in Newfoundland. She's also not familiar with her Indigenous heritage from the other side. Would it be inappropriate to call herself Indigenous? She wants to be correct and respectful. Any guidance or thoughts from anyone there?
I'll go first. It's a very that's a very tough subject. Robin started off with, I don't know my heritage. So if you don't know your heritage, then who do you identify with? If you haven't lived that way of life, then how do you know your traditions and cultures? So if you do your research and find out eventually that you can connect yourself to some Indigenous ancestry, I would suggest that you say you have an Indigenous ancestry from this person, but I wouldn't identify as Indigenous, as you didn't grow up in that culture and you didn't, that's not your way. That would be my teaching from my elders. That's what they've offered to me, and I wouldn't want someone to call you out for trying to claim something that you're not. That's a very tough subject nowadays, but that would be my advice, and I'm sure other people on the call would tune into that.
I can jump in and like, in addition to what Arlene said, Canada likes to push the word self-ID, but they don't push the underlying principles that self-ID is created from. Self-ID is not raising your hand and saying, I found an ancestor from 1610 named Henry Membertou, who was the Grand Chief of Mi'kmaq people. That's not self-ID. Self-ID is finding an ancestor, connecting to a community, or being accepted by a community, and having lived experience. So your journey, Robin, is at its beginning. You said you don't know your heritage, but then you said my great grandfather was taken, likely from Grenfell Mission. That is a part of your knowledge of your heritage. So you do know some. You just need to look and find more. And what Arlene suggested is probably the most appropriate road. You are someone with Indigenous heritage, and until you find home and connect with your people, that would be as far as you can appropriately take it with the 7 teachings of that we've accepted from Plains people in our hearts. You want humility and honesty and truth in the words that you spoke there, and you want to go forward learning with those same thoughts in your mind. Right?
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Robin, just a quick note there, because you mentioned Southern Labrador as a potential point of heritage. I would recommend getting in touch with Patty Way. She was actually she just received, or will receive, an honorary doctorate from Memorial University for her work in genealogy and tracing family roots, especially in Labrador. So I would recommend getting in touch with Patty Way. She would be very interested in this project, I would think, and it would be a great first step to try and trace your roots on the Labrador side.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know. Like I say, I do genealogy, and my family's always asked me to find those connections. And first thing I say to them is, like, I don't even know how to pick a berry, let alone live off the land. So I could have that many ancestors in my heritage, but would I identify? No way. Give me a nice house and running water, and I would never hunt, fish, pick berries, nothing. And I mean, I know I'm making some blanket statements, but there's a lot more to that. About being an Indigenous person, but for those of you who are talking about going out on the land and learning your stories and so on, so I could come up with 55 relatives, and I still don't think I could identify. I don't know the history. I don't know the culture. I don't live that culture. So I think that's a really important piece that you brought up for Robin to to make those connections too, right?
That's really, really good statement, Carol, because it's there's a misconception out there that if you qualify under the federal government guidelines to be a status Indian, then that makes you Indian. No, that's Canada telling you that you qualify. That's not that's not the nation. Like, it's not the Mi'kmaq Nation, it's not the Innu Nation, it's not Nunatsiavut Nation telling you. So you also have to have that community connection and acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be, to me, I would be so false to even try to say that,
Like
whether
a
I've got the blood or not.
really cool guy named Sean Wilson wrote one time that, and this is like we're all talking about the same thing. And Sean wrote that Indigenous research and ceremony maintaining accountability. I'm trying to find the exact quote exactly. Relationships don't just shape Indigenous reality; they are our reality. So what we're all talking about is relationships, and you need to build relationships and maintain and care for relationships. And it, like, from the navigate business entrepreneur ecosystem coffee break side to the question that Robin just asked, it is all about relationships.
Absolutely. That's one of my core values on my website is relationships. Okay, looking at the time, I want to respectfully give anyone else an opportunity to say a quick hello if you haven't, about who you are and what you're here. I know we've got some, I know Scott is like triple or 6 times booked today, but Scott Andrews is, I'm just going to speak for him. He's with Futurepreneur, so for young entrepreneurs up to the age of under 40. Alice and I keep lobbying for maturepreneurs. But Futurepreneur does have an Indigenous program for Indigenous entrepreneurs. They also have programs for persons of color entrepreneurship. And Scott is our representative here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I believe he threw some information in chat earlier. Brent, who's on camera, Brent's an economic development officer with the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, located in Corner Brook. He's here to help support this community as much as possible. Carla May had to pop off. Carla May is with Enlo, and she supports women entrepreneurs in Western region who are in the startup stage. Who else do we have? So Nicole, we know who you are now. Penny, do you want to say a quick hello?
Yep. Hi. I'm actually a new employee with Kathy Helbo at Western Driving School, and
Okay.
I'm coming on with her down at the Native Women's Association. She's setting up offices so that people from the Indigenous community can come in, have access to the resources there. And of course, I'm not status, but I was raised have with relatives hunting, fishing, and I'm back to Newfoundland from about 30 years in Ontario. So I'm interested in learning. I am a musician, and I've been to a couple of drumming sessions and think that's absolutely incredible. So I'm hoping to learn a lot more about the culture and the heritage.
Excellent. Thank you, Penny, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Carmelita Morgan put some information chat. She's driving across the province. She's out of Deer Lake with Karma Yoga with Carmelita Morgan, one of my yoga instructors that I love dearly. Lynn, do you want to say a quick hello? Lynn's with Grenfell, but you've also got a couple hats. So if you're there, do you want to share all the different hats you wear? We can see you now. You just need to unmute. Next to where you found your camera icon should be the microphone icon. I muted you. Well, did I do that? All right, try now.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, when I tried to hit my mic, it kept saying that I was muted by the organizers. So
Oh, that must have been early on. I think
I'm
we
feeling
had before
very
we started.
targeted, Carol. Hi, everybody. My name is Lynn Kendall, and as Carol mentioned, I am associated with Grenfell. I am a business professor at Grenfell Campus, and I teach accounting and finance, but my research area is actually in Indigenous business. I am Mi'kmaq of Qalipu First Nation, and the subject of my doctoral thesis actually is the connection, the relationship between tourism and reconciliation. So I'm quite excited and happy to be doing that level of work. I also do other research and engagement projects, more generally within Indigenous entrepreneurship, social enterprise, women, Indigenous women-led businesses, and a larger field of economic reconciliation. I don't know if Ivan White is still with us, but it seems like every time I turn on go into a meeting, I'm seeing Ivan's face as well. So we're
So
involved.
sorry.
Not at all. I always welcome Ivan when I'm on a committee or working on a project. So we've got a few things that we're working on together, which is really exciting, including the biomass project that he's now the community liaison for. So very quickly, I also am a tourism business owner. My husband and I own Appalachian Chalets and RV here in Corner Brook, and we also have a restaurant there, Wayward Spruce. And so we're fairly new. We're about 3 years in operation, and I'm going to tell you it's been a struggle to operate a tourism business during a pandemic. But we've learned a lot. We certainly appreciate the opportunities that Navigate presents to us. And I really want to give a shout out to Ange and Rob, as we've been certainly guiding us and all Qalipu tourism operators as we try to navigate how we can flourish in our businesses, and how just a recent conversation we had about how can we add more content, cultural content, to our businesses. So I've got some things that I've been planning and working on, just trying to get them to come to fruition. And for anybody who is a tourism operator, and Rob and I are also working on a little event that we're planning to have at Grenfell in the next few weeks. So hopefully that will all come together. And just as the very last point, Indigenous entrepreneurship is the fastest growing category of entrepreneurship. Indigenous business owners are starting up businesses 5 times faster than any other segment of the population. And we are on track to be a $100 billion industry in the next few years. So if you haven't read, anybody that's interested, this is a book that I absolutely love. It's a recent publication by Carol Ann Hilton. It's called Indigenomics, Taking a Seat at the Economic Table. And it's a very, very good piece of work about how communities, about how governments, other businesses, how can contribute to the success of Indigenous businesses, and how we can participate and become active members of the economy, because for generations, Indigenous people have been left out of the economy, whether it's for employment or business purposes. But now is the time that is changing. And this is, so Ms. Hilton has put together a really good book here. She's actually having an Indigenomics conference in BC next month that I'm really crossing my fingers and hoping I can attend. So that's my 2 cents worth. Thanks, Carol.
Awesome. Thank you, Lynn. Gertrude, do you want to say a quick hello?
Yes, yeah, I will. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm here in a couple of different, I guess, roles. So I'm here as co-chair of the Navigate Advisory Committee, but I'm also here because the business I'm involved in, Locks Electrical, which is a family business, is a certified Aboriginal business. My sister and I both are part of the Qalipu band, and being women in a construction industry, and also being Qalipu members in the construction industry is very unique. And I was interested to find out what other people had to say about their experiences being in business. So that's why I'm participating today.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Monsieur Andrew, do you want to say a quick hello? Andrew's out with out towards the Port-au-Port area.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Hibbets, and I'm an Economic Development Officer for the West Coast with Horizon TNL. We were formerly known as REDE TNL, that was RDEE TNL, and also temporarily taking over the role of Tourism Development Officer until June. So we do all the Francophone tourism marketing for the province.
Excellent. Thank you. We've got Jillian Mitsuk and Ruth Jacques are with Jillian Larkham, who spoke earlier. They're with Nunatsiavut government in the tourism sector as well. Who have I missed? Julia, I think you're with Gertrude, is that correct?
Yep, I am. I work with, excuse me, Lux Electrical. I'm the corporate financial controller. Just came back from maternity leave at the beginning of February, and yeah, working with her.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today. And Mr. Rob, you're with Ange, working with tourism, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Great session, guys. Lots of great information.
Excellent. And June, I don't think I've given you an opportunity to say hello. Do you want to say hello?
Hi everyone, I'm June Farnsworth, and I'm actually in Nova Scotia right now, but I live in Port Saunders.
Okay.
And I know a few people on the call here. I am starting a new business. I'm in the entrepreneur internship program, and I'm also with Carla May with the Women in Business in Low. And I'm starting a gallery and gift shop in Port au Soir at the Women's
Excellent.
Institute this summer. So hopefully everything will work out good. Woo.
Excellent.
And this has been great. Thank you everybody for your thoughts and your information. It's really great to see.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. And Yvonne is with Qalipu in training and education and is supports students and entrepreneurs. And you're in St. George's, I believe, right? Yes. All right. Okay, so very quickly, I'm just going to wrap up. We do have an upcoming event that Allison and the Social Folks Center for Social Enterprise, those of us who joined us last month, we had folks speaking to us about social enterprise. So there's an Impactathon coming up in June. We have our next entrepreneur coffee break is on the 18th of May. Registration is open, and we'll get that link posted for you. If you have any events that you're interested in, please let us know. Tag Navigate. Allison and her team are fantastic at promoting and sharing, and that's part of what they do for us as entrepreneurs is promote what we have. So if you have any events on social media, Instagram or Facebook, tag Navigate and make sure that we'll get that out. Navigate's website, I'm just doing a quick run through for you here, Allison. Their website has
Carol.
a lot of templates, tools, all the recordings from past sessions are there. There is a business directory. It's a free directory. You can take a look at the directory and how it's listed. It's essentially your business logo. So June, once you're up and going, this would be cool for you to get yourself added to it. You put your logo up and just follow the same contact flow information that's there. Send it to Allison, and she'll make sure that you get on their directory site. And if you're looking for someone in the region or someone who's in our entrepreneur ecosystem, then pop in there and see if there's somebody there that might be of interest. Stay connected with Allison. You can do that through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. There's a mailing list that you can subscribe to. We do send out follow-ups to folks that have attended, and also to the rest of the community for upcoming events and updates and so on. And again, the website is there to follow.
Absolutely, and you can sign up for our newsletter as well. We'll send out the recap of today's event, as well as the video recording, and that'll go out through our newsletter and through any of our updates that come out.
Yes. So I do think there's two folks I did look at. Carolyn, I know we mentioned you briefly. You're the executive director with Enlita. Okay, yeah. Excellent. Hello, and and Owen, I'm not sure if I gave you a chance to do a quick hello, if you want to say hello. Not sure if Owen is there. As you log out, you should be prompted to do an evaluation. If you could take the time to do that, we would really, really appreciate it. It helps Allison. It helps us for feedback about the events, but it also helps Allison with her funders. So if you could, good, bad, or indifferent, please let us know. We have changed our events over the last 3 years based on feedback. So we do take that seriously. So please take a moment to pop in and do that evaluation if you wouldn't mind. I know I'm a few minutes late, so thank you for hanging in with me today. Thank you on behalf of Navigate Small Business. Allison, is there any other last words that you'd like to say?
Just a huge thank you again to everyone for attending today, and for everyone who spoke and shared their opinions. I think it's really important that we're having these discussions. And again, the fact that even just the fact of saying Indigenous and that sort of blanket cultural statement, the fact of being able to step back and say, okay, but which particular group are you from? What's your heritage? I think it's just so important, and I think that's something that we should do in any situation. Just step back, listen, watch, observe, ask questions, and really learn to build those relationships and communicate. And I think that's really important for business in general, and in for the different relationships that you'll build with individuals and businesses. Also, a huge thank you, Carol, as always, for being a fantastic facilitator. And my apologies again, folks, for not being able to join via video. I'm sure I'll have a better connection next time.
No problem. You're entitled to your vacation. Thank you, Owen, for popping in who you are in chat. So I will close by saying merci beaucoup à tous. Sorry, that's the plural. Thank you, and à bientôt. See you soon, and nemolstis. So take care, everybody, and have a fantastic afternoon. Sun shining in Pasadena, so hopefully that's here to stay. Take care, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.